morning. Thanks for being here today. I'm new. I've met a few of you, but many I haven't. And it's exciting to just be a part of the Northwest family. My wife, Amber, is right over here, and we take up almost an entire row with our basketball team of kids and family members, and I'll be making fun of them later, so just stay tuned for that. But we've just been glad to be a part of the church family. We've been here for about 7 or 8 months, and it feels like longer, but then sometimes it feels like hardly any time at all. So that's what they say when you're having fun. Time flies. So we're just grateful to be a part of this. Now, I'm new, and something that is exciting for me is there's actually a lot of new people that have continued to visit our church throughout the spring and the summer. That's something that we see. So if you're new, this is your first time, or you're just kicking the tires on this whole Northwest Bible thing, we're grateful for you being here. And we talked about the Connect card, which you can fill out. We'd love to get to know you a little bit better. But I just want to say, as one new person to another, if you're figuring out our church, and even this Neil guy, this Neil Tamba guy that gets up here every week and preaches, for some of you who've been part of the church for years or even decades, you know his heart for the Lord and his heart for this church. He deeply, deeply loves you all. But if you're new and you're wondering, is that Neil guy the real deal? Is he the real deal? I'm probably the person on staff that spends the most time with him. And I can say, yes, he is. He absolutely is. And in this day and age where you just never know about celebrity pastors and figureheads and things like that, if you can trust people, he is good. He loves our church. He loves the Lord. And it's a joy to serve alongside of him every day. Now, he is in Colorado. So I'm going to point to that back camera and say, hey, Neil and Vila, for watching. I assume you're watching. Hopefully you are. So it feels a little bit like a teenager, and I just got the keys to the car, and we're going to take this thing out for a spin. There's no adult supervision here, so we're just going to see what happens. We don't know. We'll see. Well, as I mentioned, Neil has been preaching through a summer series on the book of Proverbs. And so if you've been coming any number of weeks, you've heard us take some nuggets of wisdom out of God's word and apply them to everyday life. And we're going to continue that today in the book of Proverbs. And, you know, it's something that it makes the Bible real and practical. It intersects everyday life. It's not a lofty, complicated subject. It's just how we live life every day in the world that God created. And so we're going to dig into that in just a minute. But something that we've done every week is something that Neil did from the very beginning of our series. He took some of those key lessons, those gold nuggets of wisdom that I mentioned, and distilled those down into just a couple sentences. And so at the beginning of every sermon in this series, we have read that statement together. So we're going to put it on the screen. Some of you are already falling asleep, so stand up. We're going to stand together, get that blood flowing again. I don't want anybody falling asleep this morning. And we are going to read this together on the screen. So let's go. This Bible is God's wisdom. God is for me, not against me. With all my heart, I trust in his wisdom. I do not lean on my own understanding. In all my ways, I acknowledge him. I choose God's wisdom. I choose God's life. I know that in Jesus, I have all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Let's pray together. God, we truly believe that. We believe that as we open your word this morning, there are treasures of wisdom and knowledge for us to find. And you've not made it hard. You've put it right in front of us. We thank you for how clear and simple you have made your word. And we believe that you have created this world with a certain order, a certain wisdom and pattern that we as followers of Jesus want to live by. And so as we open the word today, we submit ourselves to your teaching and to your truth. May you open our hearts and our minds, our eyes and our ears, and by the Spirit, make us a little bit more like Jesus today than we were yesterday. We pray that through the Son and by the Spirit. Amen. Please have a seat. So, I'm talking about wisdom, and I've been doing some reflecting lately. Okay, not really. I was just thinking yesterday, I'm almost 45. Now, some of you think, 45, that was a good year. And some of you, like me, think, 45? Oh my goodness, 45 is so old. I'm not 45. My parents are 45. Is this 45? And, you start thinking about your life. And, okay, I'm having a little bit of existential crisis up here, I realize. But I started thinking about just what did I think 45 would be? And, let's just face it, I'm no spring chicken anymore. 45 is halfway to 90. And, I start thinking about my life, and I am starting to feel my age. Maybe I'm starting to look my age. I don't know, honey, hopefully not. But I'm starting to feel it. I'm no spring chicken anymore. And it was just not long ago that I had one of those moments where I realized, oh, man, yeah, I'm getting old. And I was doing something ordinary, mundane, something I do every day. I was drying my hair with a towel. It's glamorous. This is a glimpse into my life here. I'm drying my hair with a towel, something I do every day. And if you are of a certain age, you've probably had this experience too, where you're doing something that's just normal, and then you heard it. Oh, my neck. I heard a noise, a click, a pop, a pull, and then just the pain. And so I'm thinking to myself, really? I can't dry my hair without pulling a muscle? How old am I? This is ridiculous. And so I do what all old people do when you get hurt. You go to the chiropractor. Now, some of you are not a fan of chiropractors. Please don't send me emails, okay? I've been through it. And this particular chiropractor, he's a miracle worker. And Dr. Matt, I went to Dr. Matt and I said, listen, Dr. Matt, I hurt myself. I was doing the most normal thing in the world. I'm just drying my hair with a towel and I hurt my neck. Is this what I can expect? Is this what life is going to be like? Dr. Matt, am I getting old? You got to help me. And he looks at me and he says, are you done? Now, he looks down at me because Dr. Matt is 6'8", and which is great for a chiropractor. So he puts me out on the table, and he's snap, crackle, pop, Rice Krispies, and doing all the stuff that he does. And then afterwards, I feel fantastic. How did you do that? And he said, well, it really wasn't drying your hair with the towel that caused this problem. It was a series of seemingly innocent, small events that led up to this. Maybe you lifted something heavy. Maybe you turned your neck the wrong way when you were driving. Maybe you sat in that office chair for a little too long with bad posture. I got a bunch of kids. Maybe I'm hauling the kids around. And those small, seemingly innocent little steps led to the final event where the injury actually happened. Does it remind you of anything else? Isn't that like sin? Sin can be a series of seemingly innocent, small, seductive decisions that you make. And yet, as they add up cumulatively over time, what seems unimportant and just a small compromise here or there suddenly results in the world crashing down. Now, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I think I'm going to ruin my life today. I think I'm going to turn my marriage into a roaring dumpster fire. I think my life is going well, but I want to turn it into such a big mess that you can see it from space. Nobody says that to themselves, and yet, often, people find themselves in that situation. And so it isn't the subtle little decisions that trip us up. It's the cumulative effect of sin in our life. And the truth is that if we're not careful, if we are not diligent and wise about how we live our lives, sin will eventually overtake us. But it doesn't have to be this way. God has given us, as followers of Jesus, everything that we need to live that abundant life of wisdom that he has called us to in Christ Jesus. And that's what we're going to talk about today in Proverbs 6, verses 6 through 11. If you have your Bible and you want to turn it to Proverbs 6. Now, if you're new to the Bible, cut it right down the middle. Psalms is right in the middle, the biggest book in the Bible. Go right one block to Proverbs, and then chapter 6, verses 6 through 11. And I'm going to read that and follow along as we do. Verse 6, go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, and yet it stores its provisions in the summer, and it gathers the food at harvest. How long will you lie there, you sluggard? When will you get up from your sleep? Just a little sleep, just a little slumber, just a little folding of the hands to rest. and poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man. Ooh, that's intense. That's ominous. Well, let's talk a second about the book of Proverbs and where this verse fits in the Word of God. So Proverbs is what they call wisdom literature. There's lots of different types. We heard a little bit about the book of Ecclesiastes last week, also wisdom literature. And so the type of writing that this is has a unique set of characteristics that is something that is indicative of that culture, of the Hebrew culture where it was written. Now, Solomon probably wrote most, if not all, of these Proverbs, and primarily he wrote them to his sons. And in fact, the first few chapters of Proverbs are full of, my son, listen to my teaching. My son, don't stray. My son, do this. My son, do that. Listen to wisdom. And his goal is to pass on some of these timeless truths onto his kids and onto the following generations, and then on to the men and women of God and down to us today. And so this idea of wisdom, something that has been gleaned and learned over time, is something specific to that Hebrew Old Testament culture. Now, lots of cultures have their picture of wisdom and what it should look like. We've already established that I'm old, right? I remember newspapers. Everybody remember newspapers? In fact, I used to be a paper boy. That was my first job. I would wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'd fold all those papers, put them in my bike, and I'd throw them here and throw them there, and my dad actually made me put the papers on the porch. I couldn't put it on the driveway. We're going for quality here. Now, you're asking, why am I telling you this story? It has nothing to do with my sermon, but old people tell stories about their childhood with no point. Okay, that's what we do. That's what old people do. Okay, so back to the newspaper. I loved reading the comic strip. And there was one particular comic strip, BC, written by a guy named Johnny Hart, who actually happened to be a believer. And he had a running gag in his comic strip about the guru. Now, if some of you read the funny pages, then you remember this, where there's an all-wise person sitting on the top of the hill, and the only way you could get to the wisdom that this person had was to climb all the way up there and then ask. And of course, in the comic strip, he comes back with some wise guy comment like this. And I'll say this to you to say, this is not the biblical picture of wisdom. It is not for the relative elite few who have suddenly arrived at the destination of finally knowing what wisdom is. Wisdom is available for young and old. It's available for everybody, and it's something that God has passed on to us here. And so I heard a definition of wisdom that I felt was probably the best way to distill all of this down into one simple sentence. Wisdom, to see things the way God sees them, and then to act accordingly. And isn't that what the book of Proverbs is trying to teach us? In any situation, maybe you're facing uncertainty, maybe it's a diagnosis, maybe it's a difficulty in a relationship, something at work. We sometimes get caught up in our own perspective of that. But if you can step back and say, how does God see this situation? Through his eyes. He is in control. He is sovereign. He is good. He is for us. We can trust him. And that puts everything else into perspective. So seeing things the way God sees them and then to act accordingly in our life. To not do is to not know. If we don't live according to the wisdom, we don't have it. So that's what God is calling us to do in this passage today. And so let's dive right back into verse 6, where Solomon says, "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise." So here it is. He's got a lesson from the created order. We're getting right into nature here and something that God created as an illustration of wisdom. Now, he says sluggard. We've already established that I'm old, and that is kind of an old-timey word, but I don't use sluggard. Do you use sluggard? It's not really a word in our vocabulary. But let's substitute that for you lazy bum, okay? So go to the ant, you lazy bum, and consider its ways and become wise. There's something about this ant that we can learn. And this idea of a sluggard is actually a very specific word only used in the book of Proverbs, nowhere else in the Bible, and it's used 13 different times. And so let's look at a couple of those examples to just flesh out a little bit of what that word means. So in Proverbs 15:19, we have this similar idea where it says, "The way of the sluggard is blocked with thorns, but the path of the upright is a highway." Now, this is Hebrew poetry, as I mentioned, and there's lots of different forms, but one of the forms is where they take two opposing views and contrast them against each other. So here we have, on the one hand, the lazy bum, the sluggard, and on the other hand, we don't have a workaholic or an industrious person. What do we have? An upright, a righteous person. And so Solomon here is contrasting the sluggard as unrighteous, immoral, and the upright or righteous person. And so we're starting to get a glimpse of what this word sluggard actually means. It has a moral or ethical slant to it. Proverbs 20, verse 4. The sluggard does not plow in season, so at harvest time they look but find nothing. Now in this culture, it's agricultural, right? There's no social safety net. There was no welfare system. And so you literally killed what you ate, hand to mouth. And so if you expect to have a harvest and look for food, and yet you've done nothing, what does that say about the moral character of this sluggard, this person that we're talking about here? Now, I'm also old enough to remember when they used to make movies about the Bible. You remember that? You remember that? I know there's Ben-Hur and The Robe and some of those things, but you know, Disney used to make movies about the Bible. I mean, that's a little bit mind-blowing for us now, but I remember as a kid, there was a cartoon, one of those silly symphony cartoons, that was actually based on this passage of the Bible. And you might remember it. It was a grasshopper who played the fiddle, and he danced around, and he had fun. Here it is. We're going down memory lane. And the ants were busy working. And then when winter came and the grasshopper had no food, he did this exact thing that the Proverbs talk about. He went to the ants and he said, I expect a harvest. I don't have anything. And do you remember, those of you who remember this, the song that he sang was, Oh, the world owes me a living. And that was the song that he sang. Okay, I told you that I'm old. Now we're talking about Disney cartoons. And this idea here is that this sluggard is a person that lacks the moral character to be the kind of wise person that God has called us to be. So one more example of that, Proverbs 24, verses 30 through 34. And this is a great expanding of this idea. It's a perfect illustration. I went past the field of the sluggard, past the vineyard of someone who has no sense. The next verse there says, thorns came up everywhere. The ground was covered with weeds, and the stone walls were in ruin. Verse 32, and here's wisdom. I applied my heart to what I observed and learned a lesson from what I saw. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Have you heard this before? Stop me if you have. Poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man. And so we have this picture of this person who just lacks character, lacks morals. And you can see how that slow, seductive, progressive creep of sin might come into that person's life. And so what is the lesson that Solomon has for that person? He says, look to the ant. Look to the ant. All right. How do you feel about, when I start talking about ants, how do you feel about that? Are you an insect lover? Are you love all of God's creatures, great and small? Or are you like me and you just want to take a blowtorch to those ants when you find them in your yard, okay? Well, y'all are a bunch of haters out there. I can tell. You hate the ants. And I, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, rise today in defense of ants, okay? I want to tell you a little bit about God's amazing creature. We're going to go a little bit National Geographic here for just a second. So first of all, did you know that the word for an ant expert is a myrmecologist? Myrmecology is the study of ants. Write that down. That's at the quiz later. Write that down. So fascinating to learn about God's creation. A newly mated queen never needs to breed again for her entire life. To start a new colony, she seals herself in a chamber underground and lays a couple dozen eggs to start with workers. And in just a week, those eggs hatch, and within a month, they are mature ants, adult ants. And in the boom of a new colony as it's growing, an ant queen will lay 1,000 eggs a day to keep up with the population and the needs for construction of that nest. And now, as they continue to grow, they they burrow deeper down. They have channels with little pods and little chambers alongside, and they've excavated these and looked at them, and there's all this complexity to the ant nest, and it's amazing. These chambers that they have are used for all sorts of different things. One is storing food, like that cartoon we saw, like the ants are storing. One nest they found 300,000 seeds stored in an ant's nest. You know what some of the other chambers are for? Composting. Ants are hippies. They compost. And they eat the fungus. That's how they feed themselves in the winter. And the ideal temperature is a balmy 72 degrees, just like my thermostat at home. They try to keep it at that exact temperature. One of the largest ant colonies ever founded was in India, and they estimated that the ants displaced 40 tons of dirt to build this colony. Okay, now I'm going to ask you, as Solomon said in verse 7, the ant has no commander, no overseer or ruler. Yeah, there's a queen, but she's down there laying eggs. She's not out there cracking the whip and telling people what to do. So how is it that the ants, by instinct, could create this incredibly complex society? They use pheromones to lay out the ant trail, and they follow. I mean, they communicate with each other with their tentacles, and I mean, it's just the social structure we haven't even begun to understand. Now, how can all of this happen with no overseer, no ruler, nobody to direct it? I'll tell you, it's because God designed them that way. The ants have an ideal way of living, a pattern that they should follow, and by instinct, without anybody telling them, they simply follow it. Now, I think part of that's because the ants don't have a sin nature like we do, right? We have a pattern, but we tend to rebel against that. And so when you look at the ant, you can see there's a God-given pattern of wisdom that he has passed on to them, and that's the ideal life that they should lead. And so in light of that, he asks this lazy, immoral person, this person who is morally and spiritually lazy, he says, how long will you lie there? When will you get up from your sleep? Verse 10, just a little sleep, just a little slumber, just a little folding of the hands, and then poverty will come on you like a thief and scarcity like an armed man. And this is this idea of how sin can be seductive. It can be so subtle, just slow, gradual, just a little sleep, just a little bit of spiritual apathy, just a little bit of pushing the border on my integrity, just a little bit. Nobody would know. And yet, the cumulative effect of that over time is sudden. And so we have this picture of a person who doesn't necessarily take sin seriously. Little by little, they surrender. And the result here in verse 11 is poverty that will come on you like a thief, scarcity like an armed man. Now, you might hear that and say poverty like poor, lacking money. And one thing that's interesting about the Bible is it really doesn't present financial poverty in this way. It never says that that's necessarily immoral. But somebody who finds themselves falling into poverty sometimes does it because of moral reasons. And so this word for poverty here, again, is only found in Proverbs. It's very specific to this book, and it talks about moral poverty, someone who's destitute. It talks about that bitter end that you will come to if you don't acknowledge God's teaching and follow his wisdom. And so what we see here is the conclusion: wisdom is not compatible with laziness. Spiritual wisdom and spiritual laziness are incompatible with each other. And if you want to pursue the life of wisdom that God has called us to, then you would avoid, run from, you'd become diligent about your spiritual health and vitality. Now, I know some of you were thinking, does that mean you become a workaholic, right? You're still stuck on this laziness and work. But this goes much beyond that. It's much deeper than that. It has something to do with our moral character and our desire to live that life that God has called each of us to live. So wisdom is not compatible with laziness. But this is a little, ants and, it's a little bit theoretical, right? I mean, we're not going to build an ant colony. And so how can we apply these principles just to our everyday life? What does reality look like as we're living this life that God has called us to lead? Well, here's one reality. Sin is slow. Sin is deceptively slow. It can creep in ways we don't realize or don't notice, and yet destruction is fast. And we have that example of that moral poverty, that bitter end comes on like a thief, like an armed man coming out on the road that you didn't expect. And so if that is true, if sin is slow, and by the way, 1 Peter 5:8 says, "Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion." Now, I know that I'm kind of controversial saying the word sin. In our culture, it really doesn't exist. Sin would be living something different than the pattern God has laid out. And so you're telling me that I can't choose my own life? I don't get to pick my own identity? I don't get to set my own course and make my own decisions? Well, you can, but God has a preferred pattern of wisdom to live by. And that destruction comes fast. Romans 2:5-8. Because of your stubbornness and unrepentant heart, you're storing up wrath against yourself for the day of God's judgment, when his righteousness will be revealed. God will repay each person according to what they have done. To those who by persistence in doing good seek glory, honor, and immortality, he will give them eternal life. And for those who are self-seeking and reject the truth, there will be wrath and anger. Now, that seems very stark in a culture that tells you you can choose your own way. And, your wisdom and truth is whatever you want it to be. But you come face to face with the reality that God has called us to a certain life, that pattern, in the same way that he's designed ants to live a certain way, he has designed humans to live a certain way. And, we talked about this a few weeks ago when Neil said, your view of God will impact your view of Scripture. But I've been in ministry long enough to know and see that also your view of your parents will impact your view of your heavenly Father. Your view of your earthly parents impacts your view of your heavenly Father. And if you, as you think about your childhood and formative years, if it was mostly about rules and rule following and right and wrong, then you might look at the Word of God and say, the Bible is just a bunch of rules. Proverbs says, don't get into debt, don't commit adultery, don't be lazy. Don't. And if you see that as just a list of rules to control you, then that's going to impact how you view God. Now, it's beyond just a list of rules. If we're not careful, we'll just lapse into sin management. We'll just get better and better at managing our own misbehavior. But is that really the life that God has called us to live? Is that the life of wisdom, of flourishing that God has created us for, not just here, but in eternity? It's not. And I want to say something that's also a little bit controversial, and that is that you should not live your best life. Have you heard that phrase? A little bit of Oprah and Joel Osteen in there. Hey, live your best life. Live your best life, everybody. Well, I mentioned we have 5 kids. And one of my wife's favorite sayings that she heard from a friend is, when our kids are living their best life, we don't have one. Because everything about them it's all about the fun, it's all about the privileges, it's all about this, take me here, do that, can you buy me this? And so when you say live your best life, isn't on some level that's what the world is talking about, is just enjoy it, have fun, live it to the fullest. In fact, our kids often remind us, Mom and Dad, you're weird. Nobody else has rules like you guys do. None of our friends do. In fact, I'm going to do this right here. Okay, if you have kids, all right, pay attention over here, kids. If you have kids and you have limits on the amount of time they can spend on their screen, you raise your hand. Look around. See, we are not weird. We're not weird. Okay? So it's only human nature at their age to want to live their best life, which tends to revolve around them, right? They're not thinking about me. And that's the lie that our culture has told us. But what is the antidote to living your best life? Is to live God's best for you. And that's the life of wisdom. So we know that sin is slow, destruction is fast, but the last truth is redemption is real. The life that God calls us to in Christ Jesus, what he came to die for in our place, is not a life of sin management, trying to just be a little bit less bad. Instead, it's a life of abundance and a life of truth, a life that we become, instead of progressively closer and closer to sin, it's progressively closer and closer conformed to the image of Christ. And so instead of living our best life, we will live God's best. And we see that illustrated in Galatians 2, verse 20. I have been crucified with Christ, and yet I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. That is living God's best. It is living Christ through me, not for myself, but for him. And that's the pattern of wisdom that God has laid out for us. And so that's what I know he wishes for you, and he wishes for me. And it's not easy. It's something that we have to be diligent about. It's something that he will empower us to do. But I can tell you this, if the ants can do it, then so can we. Let's pray. God, we thank you for the lesson of wisdom from your creation, that in your sovereignty, you gave to us. We thank you that Solomon could see it all those years ago, and we pray for eyes to see it today, that you would call us to live not our best life, but your best through us. We pray that through the Son and by the Spirit. Amen.